there needs to be someone who is sort of the keeper and reiterator of the vision.
This was the closest I've been to facing death, and I hope it's the closest I get for a few more decades.
We're making mistakes, we're fixing them as fast as we can, and what happens sometimes, though, is that some people are lost.
The personal computer is a new medium of communication.
And so I've built a lot of my success off finding these truly gifted people.
What a computer is to me is it's the most remarkable tool that we've ever come up with.
Do you know that when you've made the personal computer, though, that this will become a major industry? I mean, did you know like this?
No. It took about a year before we started to sense it. I had a partner named Steve Wozniak, who's a brilliant guy. And he did most of the engineering on the original Apple I and the Apple II.
We've got the very first computer we ever built, long before we even started a company, and I hand-wired the entire bottom, soldered it all together. That was an Apple I, the first Apple I computer ever.
Everybody was interested in computers, so I started getting a crowd around me, because even though I was too shy to raise my hand and say anything in a club meeting, after the club meetings, I would put my computer that I had built, and every week it had a little bit more working on it too. And Steve Jobs saw that I had a lot of interest around me at the club, and he said, let's start selling it, and let's make this company. Came up with the name Apple, and that's how it started.
Us two, you know, we didn't know much. We could build a little thing that could control a giant thing.
Was Steve Jobs an expert? I mean, an expert in designing the Apple I, the Apple II.
Once a year, Steve Jobs would come into town and say, that's a neat thing you built just for fun. We got to sell this.
Found anyone who said no or hung up the phone when I called. I just asked.
Those two would go on to create one of the biggest companies in the world, but it would come with one thing he couldn't envision: betrayal.
What happens is, like with John Scully, John came from PepsiCo, and they at most would change their product, you know, once every 10 years. I mean, to them, a new product was like a new size bottle, right? So I don't really care about being right, you know. I just care about success. What can I say? I hired the wrong guy.
That was Scully?
Yeah. And he destroyed everything I'd spent 10 years working for. And the companies forget what it means to make great products. What happened was that the industry went into a recession in late 1984. Sales started seriously contracting. That's a really good person to be the root of all these problems would be me. And John had cultivated a very close relationship with the board, and they believed him.
But I thought if you wanted, I'd take about 10 minutes or 15 minutes up front and tell you what we're doing at Next and why the world might need another computer company.
Steve Jobs' life had just turned upside down.
And so I decided to start over. I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me.
Steve started a new company named Next Computers.
I want to show you what it's like to work in the Next Computers productivity environment. An environment that has much, much better networking than PCs and Macs.
Yeah, Jesus, $100,000 down the drain. Sure, that's pretty good.
And that's what we're doing with our lives right now. Spending a lot of time with customers, spending a lot of time making Next Step better, and that kind of thing.
What's going on? I mean, what does Pixar do that's so extraordinary?
And I first got involved in this when I heard about this incredible group of computer graphics specialists that George Lucas had assembled at Lucasfilm that he wanted to sell. And so I went up there and saw what they were doing, and I met the leader of this group, Dr. Ed Catmull. And Ed told me about his dream, which was to make the first computer animated feature film.
In 1988, Pixar won the Best Animated Short Academy Award for Tin Toy.
And the Oscar goes to Tin Toy, John Lasseter, and William Reed.
first time a computer animated film was awarded with an Oscar?
Well, you know, Toy Story has really exceeded our expectations. It's about 180 million right now, I think, at domestic box office. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. During the next 5 years, I started a company named Next, another company named Pixar, and fell in love with an amazing woman who would become my wife. In a remarkable turn of events, Apple bought Next, and I returned to Apple, and the technology we developed at Next is at the heart of Apple's current renaissance.
I'm pretty committed to this, and seeing Apple turn around the company. I mean, I started the company with Steve Wozniak in my parents' garage, 20 years ago, and over 22 years ago. And so there's a definite place in my heart for this.
The last few years have reminded me that life is fragile. I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a scan at 7:30 in the morning, and it clearly showed a tumor on my pancreas. I didn't even know what a pancreas was. The doctors told me this was almost certainly a type of cancer that is incurable, and that I should expect to live no longer than 3 to 6 months. My doctor advised me to go home and get my affairs in order, which is doctor's code for prepare to die. It means to try and tell your kids everything you thought you'd have the next 10 years to tell them in just a few months. It means to make sure everything is buttoned up so that it will be as easy as possible for your family. It means to say your goodbyes. I live with that diagnosis all day.